In 2034, it is estimated by the Social Security Administration that Social Security will not have enough funds to pay out full benefits of Social Security for those who are receiving now and will be expecting to receive then. Will you have enough money to get by if there are changes to Social Security? What are the things on the table that Social Security might do? There's no way to tell because we're not there yet. Things that have been floated are things such as a 20% reduction to Social Security benefits, which in and of itself would be a massive change. Because many people, most people, yourself probably included, you bank on getting a set amount of money from Social Security each month. You budget on that, and that's how you determine how much you're going to need for retirement. So if you go into retirement thinking, oh, I'm getting $20,000 a month, or rather $2,000 a month from Social Security, and it turns out, well, you're not getting $2,000 a month, you're getting $1,600 a month, that extra $400 a month can be a pretty big deal. So what is Social Security and how did we get here? Social Security has not always been around. Starting in the mid-1930s, the idea of Social Security came about. So the United States and many other countries in the world were in what is now known as the Great Depression. Most people back then had relied on pensions. They worked at a place for their whole life. They're expecting to get a pension from that company. But how are pensions paid? Pensions are paid by pension funds, which are attached to a union or a given company that pays them out. Those pension funds themselves invest in often the stock market. What happens when the stock market crashes to a huge degree? Now all of a sudden those pension funds have gone basically bankrupt. So now these people who worked their whole lives with the anticipation of getting a pension now don't have that. And also the companies they worked for often, in many of the cases, went bankrupt. So now you have these elderly people who no longer had any means or way to make a living, but also don't have a pension coming in, and Social Security doesn't exist yet. And so the federal government wanted to step in order to right this ship. This was a crisis situation. They knew they had to do something, and so in 1935, Congress passed the Social Security Act. It was signed by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt to go into effect starting in 1940. So even though it was passed in 1935, the first Social Security recipient did not receive a check until 1940. Why was this? They wanted to start to have some time to collect from some paychecks, from the Social Security tax, which many of you have paid for your entire lives. So the first recipient of Social Security was a woman out of Vermont. Her name was Ida Mae Fuller. Now, from when the time the Social Security tax collection went into effect to when she started receiving payments, she didn't pay that much in taxes. So Ida, over her whole life, paid in Social Security tax $24.75. Her first Social Security check alone was just above $22. By month 2, she was already profitable on Social Security. She would go on to receive for the rest of her life a cumulative total of $9,000 in Social Security, even though she only paid in $24.75. You know, that first generation, they didn't pay it over their whole lives. They basically just put the tax on everybody else, and that initial generation just got Social Security for free. And so at that time, when Social Security initially came into effect, there was no tax on the Social Security benefits that you received. And that was the case for about 45 years. And then in 1985, under the Reagan administration, they decided that they wanted to implement a tax on Social Security. And so to this day, If you earn what the government deems a substantial income, you will pay a portion of your Social Security benefits to the U.S. government. So even though you paid the taxes to fund Social Security, then they pay you it back, which is basically your own money back. They're then going to come and tax you that again. Now, you're probably wondering, all right, Tyler, you say the government says that anybody who makes a substantial income is going to pay Social Security tax. Well, I don't make a substantial income. I'm in retirement. Like, it should be good. Your definition of substantial income and the government's definition of substantial income are likely to be pretty different. Can you guess what, for a single filer, the IRS says is a substantial income? It's $32,000 a year. Yes, $32,000 a year, United States dollars. And for a married couple, that is $44,000 a year or more. In reality, we all know $44,000 a year for a married couple in retirement is not very much money. But if you go on the IRS website, it still to this day says, for those who make a substantial amount of income, and then it lists $44,000. Now, what is going to happen? Oh, all right, Tyler, I made $44,000. What does that mean? What's going to happen to me? What they're going to do is they're going to tax 85% of your Social Security benefit. Now, you're not paying an 85% tax rate. What they're going to do is just take, if I receive, we'll just use an easy math example, right? If I received $10,000 this year in Social Security, they would take $8,500 of that and add that to my ordinary income tax. Now, that's just using simple math. The truth is, if you're only getting $10,000 in Social Security, if you don't have any other income, that's not going to be taxed. But you extrapolate that out to, what if I'm making $40,000? What if I get $40,000 a year from Social Security and I have a little bit of extra income, some additional income that puts me over the threshold? You're probably going to have a little above $30,000 added to your ordinary income for the year. So if you were receiving $40,000 in pensions and then also $40,000 in Social Security, your taxes you file for the year, they're going to say you have $72,000 in taxable income this year. And the important thing also is to break down exactly how much of those Social Security benefits are going to be reduced. Because a lot of people, they'll go in thinking, all right, this is pretty nice. I'm getting $3,500 a month in Social Security, and they'll budget about that, like we mentioned earlier. Those Social Security taxes may reduce that $3,500 down to $3,000. That's $500 a month taken off the top. How do you feel about that? Can you avoid it? Can you get around this tax? Because that's not the only thing. It's not just there's a Social Security tax. There's also a Social Security penalty for working while you're receiving Social Security. Now, a lot of people get these two things confused. They'll think that the Social Security tax and the penalty are the same exact thing, because the Social Security penalty for working while receiving Social Security, that goes away at age 67. The Social Security tax, which again is different, that never goes away. If you're above the threshold, no matter what age you are, you're always paying that tax. So for the penalty, for making more than $23,000 a year, it probably doesn't make sense to claim Social Security, because they're going to penalize you $1 for every $2 you are above that threshold, and they're going to deduct that from your Social Security. So if you're below age 67 and you want to work full time, you want to make more than $23,000 a year, probably doesn't make sense to take Social Security, because that penalty is just going to reduce whatever you would have received, or a large chunk of what you would have received anyway. But at 67, that penalty goes away. You can work as much as you want. There's no penalty, but there is still that tax. There definitely is still that tax. So again, it goes to the question of, do you have a plan in place? What is your plan to make sure you're forecasting this out, understanding this and taking action to see if there's any way that you can avoid this overall tax. Because it's a very important thing to go over, and that plays into also what is the best Social Security claiming strategy. So for a single filer, you don't really have many additional strategies you can use. You're going to claim on your own record unless you have a spouse that passed away. And if that spouse was getting a higher benefit than you are, you're going to claim survivor's benefits. That's a no-brainer. Claim survivor's benefits, you get 100% of their full retirement age benefits. For a married couple, you may have some other options. So there is a little something called the spousal benefit. And what this means is this was designed so that if one spouse is home with the children growing up, they're not penalized by getting zero Social Security benefit or a really low benefit. So how this works is, let's say we've got John and Jane, right? John's getting a Social Security benefit of $4,000. Jane's scheduling to get a Social Security benefit of $500. We'll make it an extreme example to illustrate the point. Well, when they get to the filing age, so in order for Jane to even claim spousal, John has to actually be taking Social Security. She can't claim spousal if John's not even taking it, if she's claiming it on his record. Let's say they both claim at age 67. John's going to get his $4,000. Now, what Jane's going to do is she's not going to claim on her record. She doesn't want that $500. What she's going to do is she's going to elect spousal benefits. She's going to claim spousal on her husband's record, and then she's going to receive $2,000 a month. So that's a pretty big difference. We're talking about, for the household, $6,000 a month versus if she claims on her own record $4,500 a month, and that $1,500 can really, $1,500 extra could really be the make or break for this couple. And if they don't claim right, that could be the make or break. So that's why it's so important with Social Security to really understand all these various different things, because there really are a lot. There's a lot of things that go into it. And that's not even to get into the effects of the Social Security tax, in addition with required minimum distributions from portfolios, and then getting into Medicare, when you have the potential IRMA tax, where you pay more for Medicare if you make too much. That's for another segment, it's for another episode, but that's why all of this is so important to grasp and important to make sure you have the full, or at least a good understanding of what you're doing and how your Social Security relates to your retirement accounts, relates towards your Medicare, relates towards your overall picture of what you're trying to accomplish.